Your grandpa was just a squatter. Those were the words Brandy Hutchwell screamed at my grandfather's funeral, while his casket was still being lowered into the ground. Picture this, a 50-something fake blonde in a neon pink blazer stomping through cemetery mud, pointing her press-on nail at my face, demanding I hand over 900 acres worth $3 million. She called my war hero grandfather, who earned this land fighting in Vietnam and farming it for 60 years, a squatter. At his own funeral. Worst mistake of her life. Because Chester didn't just leave me land. He left me a legal nuclear bomb that would vaporize anyone dumb enough to try stealing from his family. My name is Riley Thornfield, and this is the story of how a fake HOA queen tried to steal my inheritance and ended up in federal prison instead. Drop your location below and tell me, have you ever dealt with an HOA nightmare? I promise yours doesn't end with handcuffs and FBI raids. Buckle up. This gets wild. Let me back up 3 months. I'm 34, work in remote IT consulting, and I was living in a cramped city apartment, visiting Grandpa Chester once a month like a dutiful grandkid. Then I got the call. Chester Thornfield, Vietnam vet, built like an oak tree, hands rough as tree bark from 60 years of farming, had passed away peacefully in his sleep. This man raised me from age 8 after my parents died in a car crash. Every summer evening, we'd sit on that creaky front porch swing that groaned like an old ship. Him smoking his pipe, teaching me that land isn't just dirt, it's legacy. The inheritance blindsided me. 900 acres. 400 acres of mature timber worth more than most people's houses. 300 acres of pasture that could feed half the county. 200 acres including the homestead where Chester built his empire from nothing. The family lawyer confirmed what felt impossible. Nearly $3 million worth of property owned free and clear. I spent that first week in his farmhouse kitchen, breathing in the lingering smell of pipe tobacco mixed with decades of coffee stains, trying to process inheriting what amounts to a small kingdom. I ran my fingers through Chester's old surveyor maps, paper edges worn soft as silk from decades of planning. The musty smell of his map cabinet mixed with machine oil from his surveying equipment told the story of a man who measured twice and cut once. Then the snake slithered into paradise. Brandy Hutchwell had invaded Millbrook Falls 3 years ago. She bought the biggest McMansion in Creekside Meadows subdivision, one of those plastic palaces with fake columns and a garage bigger than Chester's entire barn. Within 6 months, she'd crowned herself HOA president because nobody else wanted to referee her wine-fueled power trips. Here's what Brandy saw when she stared at Chester's land from her deck every morning, wine glass in hand at 10 a.m. $. She wanted to transform all that wasted farmland into a luxury golf resort. Condos, spas, the full suburban cancer treatment. The day after Chester's funeral, while I'm still figuring out which end of a cow eats grass, this woman files an official complaint with the county claiming Chester's will was suspicious. She demanded a full investigation into whether some unfit city boy deserves such valuable property. Then she really showed her class. Planted a hit piece in the local newspaper suggesting I'd sell out to toxic waste companies. Started a scare campaign about agricultural runoff poisoning subdivision wells. Claimed property values were plummeting due to farm noise. The absolute cherry on top? She Googled how to steal farmland legally on the library computer and forgot to clear her browser history. Our librarian, sweet Mrs. Patterson, screenshotted that search faster than you could say evidence and texted it to half the county. But here's where Brandy made her fatal mistake. She assumed I was some soft city kid who'd roll over at the first sign of trouble. What she couldn't know was that Chester hadn't just left me land. He'd spent 60 years building the perfect legal fortress, documenting everything, preparing for exactly this kind of vulture. See, Chester survived 3 tours in Vietnam and 40 years of droughts, floods, and government bureaucrats trying to steal his land. He didn't just teach me farming. He taught me warfare. Brandy's opening move hit like a sledgehammer wrapped in legal paperwork. 2 days after I buried Chester, I'm sitting in my pajamas trying to figure out how to work his ancient coffee machine when the doorbell rings. Sheriff's deputy. Official envelope. That sinking feeling when you know life just got complicated. Brandy had filed a lawsuit claiming Chester's will was forged, accused me of straight-up fraud. Her complaint, written by some shark lawyer from the state capitol, demanded the court investigate irregularities in the suspicious timing and convenient terms of the alleged will. The real gut punch? She'd convinced a judge to freeze everything. Temporary injunction meant I couldn't sell, couldn't develop, couldn't even cut firewood without court approval. My $3 million inheritance was locked up tighter than a tick on a hound dog. But Chester hadn't just taught me farming. He taught me patience and reconnaissance. While Brandy was busy celebrating, I took a page from Chester's old Army playbook. Gather intelligence before you strike. I drove to the courthouse and filed a Freedom of Information Act request for all HOA records, planning documents, financial statements. $47 well spent. Chester always said, the best investments come cheap. What I found would have made Chester laugh until his sides split. Email chains going back 2 years showed Brandy coordinating with Millbrook Development Group before she even owned property here. The paper trail read like a military operation. Target acquisition. Timeline planning. Asset evaluation. And there it was, buried in a draft email she'd been too careless to delete. Once we forced the sale, water rights transfer automatically with the deed. That's when I remembered something Chester had drilled into me during those long summer evenings on the porch. He'd pull out his old surveyor maps, pointing at the well markers with his pipe stem, explaining how water law worked in our county. First in time, first in right, Riley. That's how they settled the West, and it's still law today. Chester's 1962 well permit didn't just give us water. It gave us power over every drop that flowed through the subdivision. 40 years of legal precedents that trumped every fancy development plan Brandy could dream up. Without our water, her golf course was just expensive dirt. I called Brandy that evening, voice casual as sweet tea on Sunday. Hey neighbor, heard you're concerned about subdivision water quality. Funny thing happened when I was reviewing Chester's old permits. The silence stretched longer than a country mile. Turns out the whole subdivision is actually dependent on our well system. Chester's 1962 rights are senior to everything built after. Legally speaking, I could cut off water access tomorrow if I felt like it. The sound that squeaked through the phone reminded me of air leaking from a punctured tire. But hey, I continued, letting the implications sink in, I'm sure we can work something out. Neighborly cooperation and all. Within 24 hours, Brandy launched a reputation war that would have impressed Joseph Goebbels. Social media exploded with rumors about the unstable city boy who couldn't handle rural responsibility. Anonymous Yelp reviews claiming dangerous ranch conditions. Fake safety complaints flooding county offices faster than she could type them. The woman even tried planting a newspaper story about me planning some toxic waste facility. But here's what Brandy didn't understand about small communities. Loyalty runs deeper than her shallow schemes. Chester had spent 60 years building relationships with people who remembered when he came back from Vietnam with nothing but determination and a Purple Heart. Marcus Webb, the newspaper editor, had shared coffee with Chester every Tuesday for 2 decades. When he heard about Brandy's smear campaign, his journalist instincts kicked in like a bloodhound catching a scent. Dolores from the diner started tracking every suspicious meeting in her back booth. Buck at the hardware store, Chester's old Army buddy, began noting unusual supply purchases. Mrs. Patterson at the library kept tabs on who was using computers for research about property law. By week's end, I had my own intelligence network that would have made the CIA jealous. But Brandy's real assault was just beginning. She'd somehow convinced the county to review our agricultural zoning. Suddenly, inspectors swarmed Chester's land like locusts with clipboards, measuring everything from chicken coop distances to the exact angle of our barn roof. Her masterpiece? Filing noise complaints about our rooster crowing at sunrise, in farm country where roosters have been doing their job since before Columbus got lost looking for India. Time to get serious. I spent that weekend installing trail cameras around the property, the same ones Chester used for tracking deer. Except now I was hunting a different kind of predator. 48 hours later, pay dirt. My cameras caught Brandy's pink Cadillac parked at our north gate at 11 p.m., her stumbling around with a flashlight like some bargain basement private investigator. She was photographing everything: water troughs, fence posts, even our compost pile, building a case file like CSI, Farmland Edition. But while she was playing amateur detective, I was doing real homework. Those HOA formation documents I'd been studying? Pure comedy gold. Turns out Brandy's entire power structure was built on quicksand and wishful thinking. No proper state incorporation. No registered agent. No official voting procedures. Her board meetings were wine parties where she made decisions while her neighbors nodded along, too drunk or too polite to object. Chester used to laugh about contractors who try to shortcut the foundation work. Bad paperwork's like a house built on sand, Riley. Looks solid until you test it. Well, Brandy's legal authority was about as stable as a one-legged cat in a sandbox. Then my cameras caught something that made my blood pressure spike into the danger zone. 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. There's our HOA queen dumping something into Willow Creek, the same creek where county inspectors were scheduled to test water quality the next week. When I hiked down that morning, the whole section reeked like a paint factory had exploded. She'd poisoned our creek with industrial chemicals, then planned to blame Chester's farming operation for the contamination. The woman was literally manufacturing evidence to frame a dead war hero. Brandy's third assault hit me right in the wallet, the one place where even tough guys cry. I'm sitting at Chester's kitchen table, coffee going cold, staring at a property tax bill that looked like a phone number. $47,000. The county had reassessed our land at highest and best use, meaning they were taxing dirt like it was already a luxury resort. Due in 60 days or foreclosure proceedings would begin. They couldn't steal what you owned outright, but they could sure as hell tax you into bankruptcy. That's when Chester's voice echoed from those summer porch talks. The government's got more ways to skin a cat than you can shake a stick at, Riley. But they also got rules they have to follow whether they like it or not. I spent that night digging through Chester's old filing cabinet, the metal beast that groaned like a dying cow every time you opened a drawer. Buried under decades of receipts and warranties, I found his veterans benefits folder thick as a small-town phone book. Chester had filed for homestead exemption years ago but never needed to activate it. Military veterans got special protection against property speculation taxes. One phone call to the county assessor, one faxed form that Chester had filled out in 1987, and that crushing tax bill dropped 60% from financial ruin to manageable payments. Just like that. Chester had been playing chess while everyone else was playing checkers. But while I was learning tax law the hard way, I decided it was time for professional backup. Chester's life insurance, $25,000 he'd kept for when the wolves come calling, bought me the best private investigator money could hire. Jake Morrison. Former FBI agent who specialized in white-collar fraud. The kind of guy who could find dirt on a soap salesman. What Jake uncovered in 72 hours would have made Chester howl with laughter. Brandy Hutchwell was about as real as a $3 bill. Born Brandy Hutcherson in Oklahoma. Bankruptcy court regular. Name-changing professional who'd pulled this exact scam in 3 states. Her method was simple. Target elderly rural landowners. Create legal chaos. Partner with development vultures. Disappear before the lawsuits started flying. But here's where it got really interesting. Jake's investigation revealed Brandy's master plan, and it was more twisted than a mountain road. She wasn't just trying to force a cheap sale. She was planning to steal our land using something called adverse possession, basically legal theft for patient criminals. The scheme was diabolical in its simplicity. Use legal harassment to drive me off the property. Establish caretaker occupation through her development partners. Maintain continuous presence for 7 years. File for ownership based on abandonment. 7 years of squatting to steal $3 million, all perfectly legal if nobody fought back. Meanwhile, my small-town intelligence network was delivering information that would make the CIA jealous. Dolores tracked suspicious meetings between Brandy and men in $1,000 suits who paid for coffee with corporate credit cards. Buck documented her purchases of professional surveying equipment way beyond what any real homeowner would need. Mrs. Patterson delivered the smoking gun. Library computer records showing Brandy researching quiet title actions and landowner abandonment proceedings. The woman had been studying legal theft like it was her college major. But the most chilling discovery came from Jake's financial investigation. Brandy's development partners had already sold pre-construction condos worth $80 million, banking on guaranteed acquisition of Chester's land. $80 million in investor money, riding on stealing from a dead war veteran. The audacity took my breath away. The nuclear bomb that would vaporize Brandy's dreams was hiding in Chester's recipe box. I'm cleaning out his kitchen drawers, sorting through 60 years of accumulated memories, when I accidentally knock over this dented metal tin that had been camouflaged behind the salt shaker since the Carter administration. Recipe cards exploded across the linoleum like oversized confetti, Dolores's apple pie, Christmas ham glaze, hangover cure soup. And there, folded smaller than a prayer card between Sunday pot roast and Depression-era cornbread, was a piece of yellowed legal paper that made my heart stop. Perpetual Agricultural Covenant, 1962. The document felt fragile as butterfly wings in my trembling hands, but the words were clear as crystal. Should the current owner or any successor attempt to alter the agricultural designation of said property for commercial, residential, or recreational development purposes, ownership shall immediately revert to the state for perpetual conservation. Every single acre. Forever. Chester hadn't just bought farmland in 1962. He'd bought a legal time bomb with a 60-year fuse. And Brandy had been dancing on the trigger for months. I called Harlan Becker, Chester's lawyer, my voice cracking like a teenager's. "Harlan, I just found something that changes everything. The agricultural covenant." He chuckled like he'd been waiting for this call his whole career. "Wondered when you'd discover Chester's masterpiece. That document's been sitting in state files for 60 years, just waiting for some fool to try rezoning his land." The implications crashed over me like a cold wave. Any attempt to rezone would trigger automatic reversion. The state would get the land for free. Developers would get nothing. Brandy would get bankruptcy court. But Jake Morrison's investigation had uncovered an even juicier detail. Millbrook Development Group, Brandy's secret partners, had already sold $80 million worth of pre-construction condos to investors. $80 million in contracts promising guaranteed lakefront luxury living and secured development rights. Brandy had personally signed guarantees that land acquisition was a done deal. If the development failed, she owed $2 million in personal liability to investors who trusted her promises. $2 million she was borrowing against a property that could never be developed. The woman was financially naked and didn't even know it. Every legal action Brandy had filed, every zoning challenge, every development application, every environmental complaint, was building the exact paper trail needed to prove intent to develop. The more she fought for rezoning, the stronger the case became for triggering Chester's covenant. She was literally constructing her own legal execution. Brandy's desperation hit full-blown panic mode. Her first move was pure vandalism disguised as utility surveys. Suddenly, crews with official-looking hard hats were accidentally destroying our fencing while claiming to check power lines that hadn't needed maintenance since the Clinton administration. Then she tried to burn down Chester's barn. I was working late on survey calculations when the smoke detector started screaming like a banshee. I rushed outside to see orange flames licking at the barn's south wall. The smell of gasoline so strong it made my eyes water. If Chester hadn't installed that automatic sprinkler system back in the 90s, 60 years of family history would have gone up in smoke. My security footage was clear as daylight. Brandy's car parked behind the tree line at 1:47 a.m. Her stumbling around with gas cans. The flash of ignition that started the whole mess. The woman had committed arson on camera while wearing that ridiculous pink blazer that made her visible from space. But the real turning point came when Marcus Webb's investigation finally went public. His newspaper expose hit like a bomb going off in church. Local HOA president's criminal past exposed. With sidebar stories about development fraud, identity theft, and connections to organized crime that made the whole county gasp over morning coffee. Marcus had traced Brandy's financial backing all the way to its source, a hedge fund with documented ties to money laundering operations in 3 states. The FBI had already been investigating them for racketeering. Brandy had unknowingly made herself an accessory to federal crimes that carried decades in prison. The sound of federal agents parking outside her McMansion that Thursday morning carried across the valley like thunder before a storm. Black SUVs with government plates. Men in suits who looked like they could bench press small buildings. Search warrants that gave them permission to turn her fake palace inside out. By evening, Brandy was sitting in county lockup, waiting for federal marshals to transport her to a facility that didn't offer wine service and fake-friendly HOA meetings. The courthouse had never seen a crowd like this. Standing room only, with overflow spilling into the parking lot and people watching through windows like it was the Super Bowl of small-town justice. County commissioners had scheduled an emergency meeting after the FBI investigation exploded across every news station in the state. Federal agents sat in the front row, notepads ready, looking like they could arrest someone just by staring hard enough. And there was Brandy, slumping into a back row seat wearing dark sunglasses and a brown wig that fooled exactly nobody. Harlan Becker stood first, carrying a folder thick as a phone book and wearing the kind of smile that made defense lawyers wet their pants. The projector screen lit up with security footage so clear it could have been a Hollywood production. Brandy at midnight dumping paint into Willow Creek. Close-up of her bribing County Inspector Williams. Audio recording of her planning to frame Chester's legacy. Ladies and gentlemen, Harlan's voice carried the authority of 60 years in courtrooms. You're watching attempted theft of a war veteran's property through fraud, environmental terrorism, and conspiracy with known money laundering operations. But the real bombshell came when he displayed Chester's 1962 agricultural covenant on that big screen. Any attempt to rezone this property triggers immediate reversion to state parkland. Mrs. Hutchwell's development scheme was not just criminal, it was legally impossible from day one. That's when Brandy completely lost what remained of her mind. She shot up from her seat like someone had lit her chair on fire, pointing her finger at me and screaming loud enough to wake Graves 3 counties over. This is unfair. I've worked too hard to let some unfit city boy destroy years of planning. I deserve compensation for my efforts. Your grandfather was just a squatter anyway. Nobody should own that much land when developers can put it to better use. She just confessed to fraud, conspiracy, and bribery on live television. I stood up slowly, every eye in that packed courthouse focused on me, and delivered the line I'd been practicing since this whole nightmare started. Ma'am, you just confessed to federal crimes on camera. But more importantly, you disrespected a war hero at his own funeral. In this county, we consider that unforgivable. The applause started as a rumble and built to thunder that shook courthouse windows. Through the chaos, I watched federal agents walk toward Brandy with handcuffs that gleamed under those TV lights. The sound of those handcuffs clicking shut was sweeter than spring rain on dry farmland. 6 months later, I'm sitting on Chester's porch swing, watching the sunrise over land that will never be threatened again. Harlan's voice crackles through the phone. Brandy just got sentenced. 5 years federal prison, full restitution ordered. The judge called it one of the most brazen attempts at rural land theft he'd ever seen. County Inspector Williams got 3 years and lost his pension. Planning Commissioner Reynolds was banned from public office for life. The hedge fund she'd been fronting? Under federal investigation in 12 states for money laundering through rural development schemes. But here's the sweet irony that would have made Chester laugh until his sides hurt. Brandy's own HOA neighbors voted to dissolve the association and incorporate their subdivision into the new state park system. Turns out they preferred conservation over the kind of development that attracts federal raids. The Chester Thornfield Memorial Conservation Center opened last spring, 200 acres of public hiking trails, educational programs teaching sustainable farming, and a scholarship fund for rural kids studying agriculture. 25 students so far, each one carrying forward the values Chester lived by. The legal precedent from our case, they're calling it Chester's Law, has been cited in similar situations across 3 states. Agricultural covenants are now standard protection for family farms threatened by development pressure. Standing in Chester's garden this morning, hands dirty from planting vegetables that will feed the community center's programs, I can almost smell his pipe tobacco mixing with honest soil and growing things. Chester had been right about patience, preparation, and the power of community standing together against bullies. His 60-year investment in relationships and legal protection had created something that would outlast us all. Now I want to hear from you. What's your inheritance nightmare story? Have you dealt with someone trying to steal family property? Drop a comment below and share your experience. And if you enjoyed watching Brandy get exactly what she deserved, make sure to subscribe for more stories of entitled neighbors getting their comeuppance. Trust me, the food truck empire story I'm covering next makes Brandy look like a complete amateur at the fraud game. Thank you for watching. Hit that like button, share your thoughts below, and subscribe for more real-life justice stories each week. Remember, you don't have to be a war veteran to protect your legacy. You just need to know your rights, document everything, and never back down from bullies. See you in the next story.